Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our first of our webinar series, Cost, Cloud, and Customer Success, Why Companies Leave QuickBooks for Sage Intacct. Today's webinar is titled, Still Using QuickBooks? Here's what's costing you, brought to you by Sage Intacct and Cargas. Today's speakers are Linda Pinion and Chris Stetler. Linda Pinion, known as the voice of Sage Intacct, is a principal solutions consultant boasting more than 12 years of experience within the software. She has gained a wealth of opportunity and industry knowledge from implementing, selling, and supporting multiple solutions. In addition to her software expertise, Linda's extensive background has enabled her to empower professionals and own and manage a VAR system. Linda is an expert collaborator who brings together professionals from diverse departments at events such as Sage Intacct's customer and user group meetups. Chris Stetler joined the Cargas Group in 2021 as a systems consultant for our ERP practice, helping clients understand the power of Sage Intacct. Currently, he serves as their solution strategist, performing product demos for prospective and current customers, building out solution environments with third parties, and collaborating with Sage on unique sales opportunities. Chris has more than a decade of experience in banking and accounting. Before coming to Cargas, Chris served as a QuickBooks Pro advisor at a local accounting firm, implementing, training, and supporting QuickBooks for clients. Having spent over a decade in banking and accounting, Chris has become very familiar with QuickBooks. So just a few housekeeping items before we do get started. We encourage you guys to use the questions pane on your webinar control panel to post questions throughout the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation to respond to all of your questions, so feel free to put them in and Chris will happily go through those. In the handout section of the control panel, you will find a link to the download to the slides of today's presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you about an hour after the event ends. The recording will be posted on the Cargas.com website as well. So if nothing else is needed, you guys are ready to get started, so enjoy the webinar. Are you able to see that okay?
I see it fine. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So welcome, everyone. As advertised, I'm Linda Pinion, and I'm happy to be here today with the Cargas team, and we've got a great topic for you. It's all about what is QuickBooks costing you. And as mentioned, this is part of a series, so make sure and follow up with the other webinars that are coming after this one. Before we get started, we wanted to do a couple of polls here. The first one is to ask you, what is your top initiative for this year? And we've given you some options here for answering. The first one is improve visibility, perhaps go paperless, reduce spreadsheet usage, close the month faster, or maybe you just want to take multiple vacations. So if you take a moment and answer that, we would greatly appreciate that, and then we'll have the results here in just a moment. This is really for us to share with each other, you know, what our businesses are doing and what's important, and it also helps drive additional webinars and interest in topics for us. So if we could have the results of that poll. All right, reduced spreadsheet usage is a big tie with taking multiple vacations. I go for the multiple vacations. Perhaps if we can reduce that spreadsheet usage, we'll have more time to take those vacations. So thank you for that. And let's go ahead and jump right in. And you've already had our introductions, so you know who I am. Chris is going to be following up. We'll be bantering back and forth a little bit during the session as well. And as mentioned also, we are recording today, so you will have the ability to have a recorded asset. We're going to hold all of our questions till the end. However, if you do have questions, you can put those in the chat box. One more poll before we get started, and that is about what tools you're using today. So first off, we know that a lot of you are using Excel because you've already told us about your spreadsheet usage, but perhaps some of you are Sage Intacct customers today, and you just wanted to jump on and learn more about what's going on with the product. So perhaps Sage Intacct reporting tools, or maybe you're using a third-party reporting tool or a combination of tools. And then, of course, we always like to give you that option that you don't know, you're clueless. So if you take a moment and answer this poll, that would be great. I'm going to bet, Chris, that Excel spreadsheets is what's going to probably rise to the top here based on what we already know.
I would imagine so, yes.
And there we have it. So Excel spreadsheets and then a combination of tools. So today, Chris being the QuickBooks Pro here, and us both knowing Sage Intacct, we're gonna show you some things and talk about some things in this series that's really going to get you to a point where you won't eliminate Excel. That's not really the goal, but we will reduce the number of spreadsheets that you're using by moving to Sage Intacct. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we want to talk about cost, and sometimes it's not real clear to us what we're paying for something because we have really costs that are hidden. And I wanted to just point out a few things that maybe you haven't really thought about that you're contributing to and that you're paying for. One is around paying for development that you don't need. Many times when you subscribe or you purchase a product, specifically a software product, you're paying for that product to be continued to be developed, and perhaps the development that's happening is not really it's not really keen to what you need. It's not addressing the things that you need. So you're paying for stuff that you're probably never going to take advantage of. You also have every year, most of us go through an audit, and when you don't have an organized system and you don't have things in place to help you, that causes your audit to cost more. Auditing is never a fun task, but it does have certain pieces of information that have to be furnished. And if it takes you longer to find that information and to gather that for the auditors, then it just stands to reason that the audit's going to cost more. When you look at the processes that you do today, every time you touch a piece of paper, and one of those options was about going paperless, it takes more time, and it also has the opportunity to create more errors. Every time you touch a piece of paper, every time you re-enter data, that redundancy that you see in the list here, if I enter something and then I turn around and hand it to Chris and Chris enters it and then Chris does something else with it and he passes it to someone else, we have just opened it up for a lot of errors. It's easy for us to fat finger things and not catch things. It's also really not giving us the visibility that we need. So every process takes longer. The other thing that sometimes people don't think about at the entry level, we're not thinking so much about the competition there. But if you're thinking about your business and how you're planning and what your growth looks like, are you possibly losing opportunities to your competition because it's taking you longer, because you don't have that visibility, because everything is not organized and in a manner that you can put your fingers on it, so to speak? So you might be losing opportunities, and this is costing your business. And then the last one is really around attracting talent. And it's pretty obvious that I'm not in the cool kid age bracket here. I call that cool kid age bracket from about 23 to 30. I call that group the cool kids. And when you start looking at people that you want to add to your business and grow your areas of expertise, younger people want to work for companies and with companies that are on the latest and greatest. they are used to having that technology, and they want to have all of the neat stuff, if you will. And so if you're using an older, outdated product, that's not going to be as attractive to that younger set of go-getters that might be the folks that you want to add to your employment. So attracting talent could be something that's costing you from getting those cool kids, as I like to say. So let's think about the cost. And this is a slide that's been around forever, constantly being updated because technology changes. But the gist of this is that we call it the iceberg slide because there are things that, like with an iceberg, you only see the tip of the iceberg. You see what's sticking out of the water. What you don't see is what's underneath the water. So when you start looking and comparing cost, there's a lot of cost that's under the water that maybe you're not thinking about. So when you're not using a solution that's cloud-based, you're looking at costs that are not as easily identifiable. So what I wanted to do was just point out some of those costs to you that maybe you haven't thought about. So when you think about, the cost for an on-premise solution, there's a lot of responsibility on your part. And part of that responsibility really is functioning as the IT department. So you are managing the software. You are doing those backups. You are the person or the team that's responsible for doing all of the updates and making sure that everybody can get into the system. Any questions, any problems that they have are really coming to you. And anything that involves whether or not the software is available, we call it uptime. If they're able to access that information, if they're able to get into the software and do their day-to-day business, that's all on you. If there's any problems with those updates that you've installed, or when you're installing those updates, they can't get into the system and there's an extended period of time, all of that maintenance and those upgrades is all on you as the customer. Different than when you look at a cloud-based solution like Sage Intacct, that responsibility is on us as the vendor, as the publisher, is what we usually say. So this is a completely different model. It's a model that is referred to as a subscription-based model, which means that you're subscribing to it and you're paying a subscription fee. You're also paying for education and you're paying for implementation. Now, those are costs that are not hidden in that they are part of that entire statement of work, that proposal that you see. So it is software and implementation, and that is based on what you are subscribing to. So again, little different there. You subscribe to what you need when you need it, not before you need it. So you're not paying for applications that you don't need until you actually have that requirement. The other piece that's very key here is all of that maintenance that I talked about before that you or your IT team is doing. If you have an on-premise solution, we are doing that, we as the publisher. So that means every quarter, when we have our quarterly updates, we, Sage Intacct, are taking care of that. We're uploading and doing those updates. You don't have to do them. If there's any issues or problems with that, that's all on us as the publisher. All of the certifications, all of the data security, all of that is taken care of by us. It's part of that subscription that we have with you. So you don't have to take care of that. And that's why we like to point out these costs to you, because not only do you have the activities that you need to do if it's on-premise software, but you have to have the manpower and the resources to do that, which means that you have to have people, and those people have to be educated and they have to have the knowledge in order to do that type of work. So what does it mean to evaluate a cloud-based solution? So first of all, this is new to a lot of people. So sometimes it's easy to say, we don't know what we don't know. It's important to do your homework and to do some research. You might refer to it as your due diligence, just to make sure that you understand all of your options. And there is absolutely no harm. In fact, it's encouraged that you reach out and you ask for help. So whether you get this from a consulting group that you know, if you get this information from your partner with Cargas, that would be a great place for you to start this homework that I'm talking about. And you can certainly get on the web and do a lot of research on your own. One of the most important things to understand is, what is your business case for moving? And, you know, when we talk to companies, when Cargas talks to companies, what always comes up at the very top as a requirement is, we're a company that's in growth mode. Well, every company, literally every company that we talk with, will tell you they're in growth mode. That's the reason that they're looking. It's more than just growth. It's where do you want to grow and how do you want to grow? And is that internal growth? Is that external growth? Maybe that growth is tied to some of your planning and your strategy that you have for the overall business. So make sure that when you define that business case for moving, that you understand that that business case has to tie to the overall company goal. And understanding what the company strategy is really important. You'll have plenty of time to deal with the tactical, but it's important for you to get that holistic view. It's also important to choose the right partner. And when I say that all partners are not created equal, there are, partners that have been doing this for many years and have extensive experience, like Cargas, that can give you the sort of the good, bad, and the ugly, if you will, to make sure that you don't make some of those mistakes that someone that doesn't have expertise in this area might not be aware of. So make sure that you choose a partner that has a good track record, that has experience doing this, and can even let you talk to some of their customers so that you have that confidence and that trust in your partner. When you pull that plan together, make sure that you execute with a few important thoughts. Pay attention to compliance. So when you choose this partner, as in choosing Sage Intacct as a partner, you will know, and Cargas will furnish you this information as well, you'll know about all of the compliance and certifications that we have, and we are happy to share with you. And there are several. You want to make sure that your data is secure. You want to make sure that you understand who owns the data. And by the way, it is your data and you own that data. You want to understand what happens if you decide that you want to discontinue the service. You want to stop the subscription. What happens to your data and how do you get that information? You also want to understand what the protection is against any data loss. So what happens if something unforeseen happens and there's loss of data? How are you protected? Where is that spelled out? And then you also want to make sure that you validate that cloud security. And again, making sure that that data is secure and that you have that data in a secure data center. Excuse me. All right, and then the last area here, excuse me 1 minute, I need to take a drink. Getting over a little bit of a cold here, is customer satisfaction. How are you measuring your customer sat? And what would it mean to you if you could increase customer sat by 10%? Now, I mention this because it's important for you to tie this together and connect the dots. What does customer sat have to do with me choosing a cloud-based solution? Well, it's all about empowering your users to have access to information so that they can service your customers at the right level. So hypothetically, let's just think about this for a moment. Chris and I'll do a little role play here. So I'm a customer and I call in to Chris and I say, hey Chris, I'm interested in knowing where my order is. I will place this order and I haven't received it yet. So Chris, being a customer service rep, old school, he's going to start scrambling. He's going to start digging in the files. He's going to start writing some sticky notes. He's going to start pinging somebody else over here on Messenger. Hey, do you know what happened to this order? Or he's going to reach out to somebody in the warehouse.
Let me run down the hall and see if I can find someone.
He's going to scramble. That is exactly what he's going to do. And all the while, I'm going to be on the phone. Maybe he's put me on hold. And so when Chris comes back, he may or may not have the answer. In my experience, a lot of times people say, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you. And again, he's going to be writing some sticky notes. So here's Chris. He's got, 15 sticky notes all over his desk. And at the end of the day, he just realizes, I've taken a lot of calls, but I haven't helped a lot of people get the answers that they need. And I've got a whole lot of follow-up to do and callbacks for the next day. So what do you think happens when Linda Pinion calls back again tomorrow and says, hey, Chris, I never did hear from you, and I'm still, checking on my order. And Linda Pinion's one of about 50 people that are calling every day. So you can kind of see how Linda Pinion and several other people could get a little frustrated and a little irritated, and they might get to the point to where they say, you know what, I'm not going to order from this company anymore because they can't even figure out where my order is. So the reason I bring this up is because everything that you do in your day-to-day activity that makes it easier for your employees to deliver that top-notch, Class A customer service is going to pay off. It's going to get you that customer that is going to continue to come back to you. They are going to be loyal to you. And what you're really doing is you're protecting the investment that you've made in getting that customer in the first place. So everybody knows that if you have to go back and get new customers, there's a cost to that. So while we're talking about QuickBooks cost today, we're talking about cost. And there is a cost to gaining a customer. And there's a cost to losing a customer. So what we want to do is we want to look at how technology really plays a role in helping us to get that customer sat number up and to keep that customer sat number up, because we always want to deliver that top level of service. So Chris, anything you want to add here about anything that we've said so far that, in your experience with people moving from QuickBooks and anything about cost?
No, just, you kind of hit everything. I think the hardware, like you said a couple slides ago, is the biggest thing, just trying to maintain and keeping up to date with technology. You know how quickly things change. I mean, look how quickly cell phones have changed, laptops have changed within the last 3 years, and just imagine, having to update thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of hardware, then sunsetting subscriptions or support, not being able to get the updates that you need in past QuickBooks desktops, versions, et cetera. But and just knowing that everything, it's nice to know that Sage handles all that and does that all for you within the subscription cost. So huge benefit.
Yeah, that's a huge responsibility, and not all smaller growth companies have the ability to staff that correctly, and sometimes they outsource that, which again,
Most
that's
of the
another
time,
cost.
most of the time they're outsourcing, and yep. And then you're on their dime or, their timeline, when they can get it done. So
Exactly. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to outline a little bit of what I'm going to cover in software today. For those of you maybe who have not ever seen Sage Intacct, I do want to tell you that this is, of course, a cloud-based solution. And it's a cloud-based solution from the get-go. It's never been anything but cloud. So it only comes, like I say, in one flavor. Everyone that is using the software is using the same version. So you may be used to software where you had different versions, and every time you upgraded, you had a different version. Everyone that uses Sage Intacct is on the same version, and as I mentioned, we do have 4 releases a year. So every quarter we have a release. We have just passed our Q3, R3 release, and we're coming up on R4 in November. The year has really gone by fast. So those releases are ones that everyone gets. There may be functionality in those releases that is not something that your company needs to activate. However, that functionality is delivered as part of the release and is documented with full release notes. In the software today, I will go over a few things, again, as we build out this series, if you will. You'll see that I'll go a little bit in different directions in the next webinars that we have. But today, what I wanted to do was just really give you that thumbnail sketch of what is Sage Intacct and what are some of the differences immediately that you would notice and that you would appreciate. The first area that we're going to talk about in C is visibility. And one of the things that is important is visibility into information. And the information needs to be real time, and it needs to be important to you in your particular role. So where we're going to start today is with role-based dashboards. And role-based dashboards, again, lots of options for you to build these out. They're very easy for you to build, and I'll show you some different ones so you can get an idea of how that works. Along the way, there are some key differentiators around how the system is put together. I like to call this the foundation or the configuration. Some distinct differences between how Sage Intacct is connected around multi-entity, around the chart of accounts and how we define it, and also a concept that we use for dimensions and account groups. And I'll do some compare and contrast as we go through, and Chris can layer in some also some comparisons there as well. But this will give you a good idea of how this is really going to change the view of data that you're going to have at your fingertips. And then we'll also take a look at, as we go through visibility, we'll look at the financial report writer. We'll also talk about the custom report writer. And again, how do I access information? because that's really the key, is just getting access to information when you need it and having it at your fingertips. All right, so I'm going to turn my camera off for bandwidth purposes. Sometimes that helps. I'm going to turn my camera off, and if you could give me permission to share my screen, that would be great. And Chris, if you can just verify, can you see my controller dashboard?
I can. You're good to go.
Okay. All right, perfect. All right, everyone. So if you happen to be new to Sage Intacct and you've never seen it before, I'm going to point out just a little bit of the user experience because there's a lot of information on this screen. And it's important for you to know whenever you move from any other solution into a new solution, you know, how easy is that going to be? Is this really going to be difficult? And am I going to have a long ramp time to get used to this new solution? So first off, let me tell you that I logged in as Emma, and Emma is my controller, and she has kind of superpowers. And superpowers meaning that I have permissions for each user, and Emma has pretty much everything turned on so she can go anywhere and do anything. I also want to let you know that I have multiple entities, and just for terminology standpoint, entity is the same thing as company. So where you might call it company, we call it entity. We deem that to be a legal entity with a separate tax ID. So that might help you to differentiate and know if you have several companies that you're managing today in QuickBooks, each one of those companies has a separate instance of QuickBooks, whereas in Sage Intacct, I only have one instance of Sage Intacct, and I am managing all of these entities or companies in that one instance. Now, I point this out too because Emma has access by permission to transact in all of these entities. Now, that might not be true. I mean, I could set Chris up as a user, and I could say Chris only has permission to transact in Entity 100. And when he clicks on this drop down, he would only see Entity 100. So permissioning is very detailed and very granular in Sage Intacct, much more granular than what you have in QuickBooks. Now, when I opened up as Emma, I control where I land. So I chose to land on my controller dashboard. Landing on this dashboard gives me a view of how my business or how my company is tracking. Keep in mind that I am managing all of these entities. So when I open up this dashboard and I start looking at these boxes here, which we refer to as key performance indicators, this is a consolidated view. So this view is across all of these entities. And that means that I don't have to do any of that mushing, and that's a technical term just for you IT folks, that mushing together of data to get the consolidated view. Today in QuickBooks, if you had, let's just say 5 instances of QuickBooks, if you wanted that consolidated view, it would take you hours to pull that together. In what you see here, I've just saved you all of those hours of that mushing or merging data together because I'm looking at a consolidated view. Now, as a controller, I might say, well, you know what? I don't want to look at everything together. I only want to look at one of those entities today. And by choosing that specific entity with my dashboard filters, I can filter this dashboard down to just that one entity and that one entity is now showing me $30,000 worth of general and administrative expenses of the total consolidated $53,000. So this is how I combine all of those QuickBooks instances into one Sage Intacct instance, and then I have the ability to slice and dice the data based on that filtering that I do at the dashboard level. So let's come back to that consolidated view, and I'm back to that total 53,000. Now, let's talk a little bit about navigation. It's always interesting to know how easy is it to move around. So this is probably very comfortable for everyone, a menu-driven system, one that you can just click on an option, it takes you right into the software. Another way to navigate is from our overview map. And this might be more comfortable for you when you're a brand new user because you have little icons and you have a business process flow that shows you all the different steps in that process flow. Clicking on an icon will take you right into the software. Another way that you can navigate is by what we call the favorites menu. And this is the gold star menu. So anything that you see gold star today is something that I have deemed to be one of my favorites. And I can create a favorites menu. And then that isolates those into a separate area for me. As well as I can also come back to my dashboard, excuse me, and from my dashboard, I can create a custom navigation, and I can navigate directly from my dashboard as well. So lots of ways for you to navigate, and you can use any or all of those. You can mix and match them if you choose to. Now, let's talk a little bit about what else is on this dashboard that Emma is looking at. We mentioned that these are key performance indicators. One of the things that I am keen on is access to information. So as the controller, I want to see that bird's eye view of how I'm tracking. The dashboard is the easiest, fastest way for me to see it, and I see what's important to me in my role. So if I want to know more about these G&A expenses, I can click on that, and it will tell me, in this case, it's going to give me the information not only from an actual perspective, but it's going to bounce that back against a master budget. So I could have multiple months here. I could have my budget here. So I could see different columns of information. If I'm curious to know why have I already blown it in office supplies against my budget, I can click into that or drill into it, as I like to say, and that will show me all the detail that makes up that $7,600 that is showing here in the general ledger. And just so you know, this little message that's coming up here has nothing to do with the software. I have a problem that IT can't seem to figure out, and it's a little warning message, and it goes away on its own, or I can close it out. So I apologize for it popping up there, but it has nothing to do with Sage Intacct. It's a desktop problem. So this $7,600, you can see the individual transactions that make that up. You can also see where those transactions are coming from. So this first one here is from an employee expense journal. You might note that we are multi-entity, so you can have as many entities or companies as you choose to manage. You can also have multiple journals set up, and you can define those journals, and that makes it easy for reconciliation. Some of the other entries are coming from the AP journal and from the general journal. Any of these transactions that you see, I can drill into those so I can see the detail. In this case, it's a bill from Neighborhood Printers. It's for some brochures that I've asked to be printed. I've actually gotten that bill and paid it. I can drill down to the check that actually paid the invoice from Neighborhood. I can see the attachments that come along with that. So I can see that attachment there and make sure that that information is is coming through so I can see all of the supporting detail. I can also scroll down and see how this was coded. So it was coded to the office supplies account, and I can start to see a little bit more information about the transaction. In this case, the department and the location. Now, these are important because this is the beginning of the conversation around dimensions. Dimensions, which you should be somewhat comfortable with because in QuickBooks you have that one dimension called class. In Sage Intacct, we have 12 predefined dimensions. One of those happens to be class, but there are 11 more of them that are predefined for you. Department and location are 2 of those. And this is what allows us to tag transactions to those dimensions so that when we get ready to do reporting, we can report and filter at that same dimensional level. So department and location are 2 of the dimensions, as well as, in this case, vendor is also one of those dimensions. So this gives us the ability to look at the data and to see how the data is coming through for reporting purposes. We also have a lot of other options up here around whether you want to view this data, you want to print it, you want to email it, maybe you want to send it out to a dashboard. So lots of ways for you to take this data and deploy it. If we come back to the dashboard, each one of these key performance indicators works the same way, that same drill down capability. And we also have the visual indicators. So think about the dashboard as your way to have that quick business insight. Now, one of the other things that gives us visibility is, of course, reporting. So when we think about reporting, we might want to look at a report. If I were Emma, I might want to look at a report that shows me my profit and loss. Again, we come back to that dimensions data, and this allows us to filter our report with those same dimensions. So starting with department down to warehouse, these are all dimensions. Dimensions, again, are what you can tag your transactions to tell the story of that transaction. Now, if I want to take this profit and loss and filter it by any of these dimensions, I can do that. Or I can just say, no, I just want to look at all of the data, which is what I've opted to do. And now what you see is a profit and loss report. It shows me all 3 of my companies, all 3 entities here, along with a consolidated column as well. All of that drill down capability that we saw on that vendor invoice, we see here now on the revenue side. Even more so because we're splitting our revenue out by product lines, and we're able to see how we want that revenue to be defined in our ledger, as well as when we get to the drill down, we have options to see that data just like we did from our expense side. So here we're looking at a customer invoice as opposed to a vendor invoice, and we're looking at the details of where we posted that revenue, along with being able to drill to the actual invoice to see our customer and the items that we sold to our customer. And here's where we see even more of that dimensional data. So we see an item, which is again a dimension, along with the channel that we're selling it into, the warehouse, the location, the department, and any of the appropriate pricing for the quantity that was invoiced. So all of this information in detail is what gives us that granular reporting. We also have the ability for you accounting folks to see the posting details and to see which journals these transactions were posted in with drill down to those journals. We're also creating a history tab, and the history tab is our electronic filing cabinet. So again, what are we going to do to help Chris as that customer service rep to make sure that he has the information at his fingertips, we're going to give him this information at his fingertips electronically, as opposed to him having to dig into the filing cabinet. And when this invoice has a payment against it, we're also going to give him access so he can see when a payment has been made. So if I'm calling in and I'm checking to make sure that Chris got my check, he can say, oh, yeah, we got it, Linda, and we deposited it, and everything's great. So all of this information is because of the way that we are setting up these business process flows. All of this reporting here that you see in the profit and loss area is being done with the financial report writer. And the financial report writer is a report writer that's designed for the business users. So today in QuickBooks, you may be doing a lot of your reporting by pushing things out of QuickBooks and pushing them into Excel. We want to reduce that process of needing or requiring things to go to Excel. We want you to use our financial report writer and our custom report writer along with all of our standard reports that we've already created for you. So you're not doing everything in Excel, because we know that Excel has room for error, and it's also usually not as up to date. This is going to be up to date, real information, because as you post those transactions, we are immediately updating everything in Sage Intacct. Now, back to our report writer. You'll notice here that it's all in English. There are steps along the left-hand side that you will access to define and lay out your report. You will lay out the rows on that report. You'll also define your columns, so you'll be able to determine what columns you want on that report. You can certainly do computations. You can filter the data by preset dimensions. You can also have different formats and colors and fonts, along with putting notations on those statement formats if you need to. One of the things that I mentioned early on was permissions. So when Emma logged on today, she had secure permissioning to log on to Sage Intacct. Then her permissions kicked in for what applications she could access and what companies she could transact into. So users have permissions, dashboards have permissions, and reports have permissions. So lots of permissions running here. And the next step is all about, what do you want to do once you have created that report? And this is a great time saver, because usually at the end of the month, specifically, you have reports that you want to send out to people. It may be a single report, it may be a group of reports. You can use the Sage Intacct scheduler to schedule those reports to run unattended in the background based on a start and end date, a frequency, and a delivery list. This is going to give you more time. It's going to free up someone from running reports and emailing reports, because you can set that up on the Sage Intacct scheduler. Now, once you've finished defining your report in the financial report writer, you can add it immediately to the dashboard. You can make it one of those favorites. You can gold star it, or you can set it up on that scheduler. Everything in the financial report writer is managed with an audit trail. So everything is captured there in the audit trail. And of course, the fastest way to create a financial report is to duplicate an existing report. So very easy. You'll have a template of about 30 financial reports to start out with, and then you can create your own, or you can duplicate from those templates and create your own version. Now, I want to show you a couple of other dashboards. This was one that was specific for our controller, but let's talk about what other types of information you might find on a dashboard. Let's just say that, one of the things that you do every month is you go through a process of closing out your month. Every company does this, and usually there's a team of people responsible for those activities. So what better way to keep everybody on point but to have an end-of-month dashboard? So this is one that I set up a long time ago, and I continue to fine-tune it. One of the things that I have added to it is a checklist. So you have the option to build out a checklist in Sage Intacct. You can create as many checklists as you choose to, and then on those checklists, you can have assignments. Create those assignments, assign activities to individuals. They'll get workflow emails letting them know that they've been assigned, and that's a great way for you to keep up and make sure that everything's done. Other things that were important to me at end of month were approving journal entries, maybe running some reports or journals, making sure that, closing entries had been made, depreciation had been done. So just making sure that I had this one place in a dashboard that everyone could come and see where we were with month-end close. Another type of dashboard might be more of a dashboard around a line manager, or maybe your AR manager, your AP manager, and this might be something that you would open up to all of your AP team, not just your manager. You might just set one up for AP, and this one is more specific to things around accounts payable. So again, what do I need to know? Well, I need to know about what payments have been posted. I need to know about what detail is in the AP trade account. Maybe I need to have some special vendor aging reports here done in some different formatting. I need to have approvals turned on, and I need to have those bill approvals here on this dashboard. So just, giving you the information that you need based on the role or based on the functional area in which you need that information. So now let's move to a little bit more of that foundation that I talked about earlier. And this is all in the company area. One of the things that I mentioned was being able to do the growth of your business. How long does it take you today to set up a new QuickBooks instance? How long does it take you to make the decisions around building the chart of accounts, or how you're going to structure reports and such? Because we are a system that allows you to have that growth capability and to be able to add an entity in less than a minute, that all takes on a whole different level of simplicity. So if I wanted to add another company or entity, all I need to do is click on add and fill out 3 pieces of information, and I'm good to go. So setting up entities, unlimited entities, and then also, if you have multiple entities, you may want to turn on inter-entity account tracking. And this is going to automate all of your do-tos and do-froms. We're going to create those journal entries for you. So that is not a manual thing that you'll do any longer. We will take care of that for you just by turning on that functionality. So entities, that's a great way for you to see how quick it is for you to grow with the product. The other thing that is always important to note is what happens when you want to configure the system to work the way you want it to work. In the company area, we have a checklist set up, and for each one of the applications, there is a configuration area. So when you start configuring Sage Intacct, you're going to configure it to work and monitor your data the way you choose to use it. So in accounts receivable, you'll set up some default accounts. So those default accounts for AR and for your discounts and so forth. You'll also turn on and turn off certain functionality. Maybe you want to use credit limits, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to enable approvals, or maybe you want to change how you want your aging to look. Perhaps you want to set up certain dimensions to be active versus others that you don't want to be active. So all of this is what you get to choose to configure in Sage Intacct. And this is something that you are going to be able to do and go back and change if you need to. Now, in addition to that, You might be interested to say, well, how am I going to get my data over into Sage Intacct? That's always a question as well. And from the Cargas team, they're going to be there to lay out that path of how that data is going to come over. From the Sage Intacct perspective, we have already created templates that will allow you to populate those templates with data and then upload that information into Sage Intacct. So we've done some of that heavy lifting. Cargas will work with you to lay out a plan to get that data, along with any historical data that needs to be brought forward as well. So in that company section, we've talked about entities and inter-entity, and also about importing data. The last area that I want to touch on quickly is just talking about access to information. I'm going to switch over to accounts payable. And, one of the things that we always want to look at is how do we get information in the manner or in the order in which it makes sense for us as a user. So one of the things that we've been working on at Sage Intacct is improving, and this is something that we do continuously, so that continuous improvement that says, how do we make this easier and better for our customers? So you'll notice here that I have something that says turn on list data interface. And let me explain a little bit about this, because I think this is a great way to just talk to you a little bit about what happens when we make changes and updates in the software. Many times we will release something in what we call beta, which is an early adopter type of release. And in this case, we are allowing you to turn it on yourself or turn it off. So right now, I don't have it turned on. I'm going to turn it on so you can see this is where the product is going when it comes to what we're calling our lister screens. Now, total transparency here. When I started at Intacct 13 years ago, I didn't understand what a lister screen was. I was making it more difficult than what it really is. A lister screen is just that. It's a screen that is a list, in this case, of my vendors. So this is a lister screen of vendors. It has the vendor ID, it has the name, it has the city. So each one of these columns is a piece of information that I can filter on. So you might think of it as a way to query that information. So if I said I want to start with all of the vendors that start with an A, I just put in A into that column, and you can see that it's filtered it down to just the vendors that start with an A. Nothing, hard about that. It's simple to understand. However, what we really wanted to be able to do was to rearrange some of this and put it in the order in which you as the operator wanted, what was important to you, because me laying it out might not make sense for the way you work. So we've always had the ability to go in and create a view. And creating a new view allowed you to go in and identify exactly what you wanted on that view. So we've always had that capability. But now we've upped our game. And so what we've done now is we've redesigned this view, this lister view. And now you can see this a little bit different. So I've turned that capability on. And this is the way that it comes generically. So this is the way that it's delivered to me as I turn it on. However, I have set up a new view myself, and my view is different than this view, and I'll show it to you in just a second. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to create filters, and here I've created a filter around the status and the one-time use. These are fields on the vendor. And I'm also able to configure the columns and to change the sorting in those columns. So just different and new functionality. When I come in and I want to edit my view, I can do that, or I can create a new view. If I look at Linda's new view here, you're going to see that, my view is a little bit different because I changed my view up, and I want to manage this view so I can come in and edit it. And I can make changes to this view just by changing the columns. So I could change the columns. I could move the columns around. So I can, drag and drop things. I can move things up and down. I can change that filtering. So I get to lay this out in the order that it makes sense for me. So this is what we're playing with today. We started out with the vendor master, and this will be the new view that all of our lister screens will have in the future. So just making it easier, making it faster for people to adapt and work in the manner that makes sense for them. So this is what I wanted to show you today, along with showing you a couple of other things in General Ledger that I think are important as a compare and contrast. And that is, the difference between, how you manage your chart today and how you manage your customers and your vendors. So staying within the concept of having multiple instances of QuickBooks. In every one of those instances, you are building a chart. In every one of those instances, you are building a customer master and a vendor master. With our multi-entity configuration in Sage Intacct, that goes away. So you're building one chart of accounts. It's a modern chart of accounts, and you'll notice I've moved into the chart of accounts, and you'll notice that all I need is the base or the natural account. I don't need a segmented structure here. So the segments go away. You build this one chart, and every one of my entities uses this same chart of accounts. That means I have one chart to maintain, one chart to deal with. It also means that I have a leaner, meaner, smaller chart of accounts to work with. If I add an account, I only have to add it once. I don't have to add it 15 times because I have 15 instances of QuickBooks. The same thing is true with my customers and my vendors. So when I add a vendor, I only add that vendor once. However, I do have the ability to come in and restrict that vendor. So if by chance that vendor should not be able to work or in this case purchase something from a particular vendor, you can restrict it to certain entities and or departments. So as an example, I always use office supplies as an example. If everyone can buy from Office Depot except entity 100, then I would restrict entity 100 and perhaps a department. Let's say the marketing department for entity 100 could not purchase from Office Depot or Office Max. However you want to structure that, you have those restriction capabilities. But again, what that means to you is you only build that customer master once and that vendor master once. That's going to free up a lot of time and maintenance for your data entry folks. All right, so that's what I had to cover for you today in product. So if we could go back to slides and let me do a quick summary here for you, that would be great.
Can you see that, Linda?
I don't see it. So, yeah, I don't see that slide. All right, so in summary today, I would just say when you get ready to make this move, make sure that you have done your homework, that you have reached out to the Cargas team, that you've created that business case, that you've done your due diligence. I would also tell you that QuickBooks is a great solution, but you'll know that you've outgrown it when you start looking at some of these areas that we've looked at today. And certainly the cost of, moving from QuickBooks to Sage Intacct, there is a cost involved to do that. And what we are focused on doing is making sure that during these webinars, we are outlining the value of Sage Intacct is going to far outweigh the cost of switching. So for my portion today, I just want to say thank you so much. And thank you again to the Cargas team. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris. So Chris, you can do your wrap up.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, so why Cargas? So as a partner, with Sage Intacct, a value-added reseller of Sage Intacct, Cargas has over 35 years of experience with Microsoft 365, Dynamics GP, Sage Intacct, of course. We also are a reseller of Salesforce, HubSpot, and we have a full custom development team to go ahead and enhance and extend some of those connections into Sage Intacct and be able to integrate some of these other CRM systems and custom solutions that your business may use, operating systems that your business may use. So we have the power to adapt and connect many different things, not just out of the box. As you know, QuickBooks is very limited in the amount of outside information that can get into QuickBooks easily. And Sage Intacct is able to go ahead with their open APIs and go ahead and take some of that information in. Some things more about Cargas as a whole, sustainable growth for future generations. So we practice shared success. We're an employee-owned company, 100% employee-owned company. So we all share the same mindset, the employee mindset, think and act like an owner. We don't get commissions, so that equals a unique culture, right? So it's not like if I make 100 sales, I get this big commission check. Okay, we all work together. We all work together to get to the end goal, which is just, bottom line profitability. And then our values, teamwork plus customer care plus employee ownership equals happy customers. And then in Sage Intacct in particular, we all of our Sage Intacct consultants, sales team, managers, directors, we all come from the background of CPAs, controllers, former CFOs. So all of us have that mindset of thinking like a CFO, knowing those business processes, not necessarily absolute experts in IT and software, but we have that background that we can think and act with accounting, with that accounting background in mind. So we're tried and tested implementation plans. We've done this 1,000 times. We have a high customer stat rating. We don't outsource anything. We don't have anything that goes to third parties, anything like that. Everything is in-house here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We're able to be your trusted advisor as your organization changes and grows. So as you go live, after you go live, we're not done. We're going to be there with a customer care plan. We're going to be with you as you acquire businesses, as you add employees, as you need additional training, or as you add, additional modules. And then just some awards and accolades here. We're a top Sage Intacct value-added reseller. Since 2011, we're always in top 10 with Sage. We're very highly recommended by Sage. We've done thousands of successful implementations. And you can see some of the bigger names there, the logos on the right-hand side that we've done: Philadelphia Eagles, Little League World Series, YWCA, etc. And then right here is our phased implementation approach. So this is just a quick look into how your implementation looks with Sage Intacct if and when you are going to switch over from QuickBooks. So we go ahead and we take a look at step one is the define phase. We're going to take a look at all of your business processes that you're currently using. We're going to take a look at your tech stack that you're currently using, and we're going to say, how can we best utilize Sage Intacct to utilize everything that you're doing now, and also add to some of your processes, and also evolve some of those processes and enhance some of those processes. Then we're going to build out your system. We're going to customize your chart of accounts, vendor list, customer list, all of your master records, and we're going to build out your environment. And then we're going to head into the model phase where we're going to train you, we're going to test, we're going to make sure that your entire team is fully comfortable before your go live date. And then we're going to go ahead and deploy at your go live. And then step 5 is the evolve stage, like I was just talking about, where we're going to be with you from go live and many years to come. As long as we want to be with you, we'll be there to help out with any additional changes to your organization.